Hi, everyone. Welcome to Art and Talk. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're continuing on bringing you another guest from the Cultural Council for Palm Beach County's current exhibit called The Gathering. And today our guest is a fine art photographer, and we'll be looking at some select images from the Gathering exhibit as well as some of his other photographic pieces as well. So thank you again for being with us. I'm Leslie Sue, the host for Art and Talk. So let's go ahead and just dive right in and introduce our guest, Joel Cohen. Welcome, Joel.
Hi, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's awesome to have you here. All right, so I was reading in your bio, Joel, that at the age of 12, you were looking through a camera viewfinder. Can you take us back to those early memories of that experience in photography? What was that like for you?
Well, it was kind of interesting because, believe it or not, before the age of 12, my mother insisted that I take art lessons because my teacher said the kid can draw. So, so my mother got me private art lessons, and which I did for 2, 3 years, and then my father's sister, my Aunt Jean, said, "You know what? You might want to take pictures." So she bought me my first camera, which was a little box camera, which I actually have, and I was hooked after that because it was just so exciting to look through the viewfinder, see something that really interested me, and be able to record it. And it was very exciting. I mean, yes, you can create, I can draw, I can very well draw a wine bottle and an apple and a bowl. That's great. And no problem with that. But I just found that little window in the camera to be a whole new world for me that I thought was really interesting that I had some control over.
Mm-hmm. And when you were looking through the viewfinder at a young age, and in addition to you were saying you had these drawing classes, it's interesting you used the word control. You had like some control over it. Did you immediately kind of start to see as the camera sees? And what really did you resonate with as you were looking through the viewfinder, and what was it that you were interested in capturing that was so appealing to your eye?
Well, it ended up developing into much more, but the shapes that I saw. See, one of the things that I find interesting is that I'm looking at you right now on the screen. I can also see that side of my room and that side of my room. And I can see up and down, even though my eyes don't move. But when you're looking through a camera, there's a rectangle. That's your world. And you can't see all the way to the left. You can't see all the way to the right. You've got to use that rectangle to create the image that you're looking for. And I found it interesting, just, moving the camera a little bit and up and down and seeing how everything changes within the restrictions of that rectangle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what excited me, is that, well, this extra stuff around me wasn't there anymore. I could focus, you should pardon the pun, I could focus on recording an image that was interesting to me. And I could control which parts of it I wanted to see and which parts of it I didn't, and how I saw them. So that's really what flipped it for me and had me put my pastels away and start taking more pictures.
Mm-hmm. That kind of got you hooked into the whole photography world. And I have a question also, Joel, before we kind of jump into some of your photography. Once digital cameras became available, because you were creating also photography during the film days. So once
Sure.
it was the advent of the digital cameras and whatnot, was the switchover easy for you? Did you just kind of naturally move into it? What was that switchover like for you?
It was seamless because nothing really changed except the delivery method. And what I found interesting is that when we moved to Florida, which is just about 23 years ago, that was kind of the real beginning of high quality digital imaging coming around. And when we got down here in New York, it was never a problem. I lived right near the photo district in Manhattan, and I was in walking distance of three of the greatest photo labs in the world. So it was real easy. We shoot some stuff, grab a bunch of film canisters, drop them off, and 4 hours later you'd pick them up and you had your images. Well, when we moved here, it wasn't that easy. And also 23 years ago, West Palm Beach was like the Wild West. It's not what it is now. There weren't a lot of labs. There was not a lot of anything here. I finally found a lab and I went to them, but I had to drive up to Riviera Beach to get them to do things for me. So it became very difficult. And when digital came out, I just jumped right on it. There's absolutely no, it's interesting. People go out and they buy $30,000 cameras, and then other people buy $100 cameras. And sometimes the $100 cameras produce better images because it has nothing to do with the camera. Doesn't matter if it's digital, doesn't matter if it's analog. All that matters is right here and right in here. That's all that counts. And I'll relay a quick story for you. I used to be a member of the Soho Photo Gallery in Tribeca in New York. I was a member for like, I don't know, 15, 18 years. And they were always struggling to pay the rent. God knows how they're doing it now, because Tribeca, of course, is a big deal. When we opened the gallery there, it was a slum. And the rent was very low, but it was supported by the membership fees of the members. And they're always looking for a way to raise money. So they devised a thing called the Crappy Camera Show, which was KRAPPYKAMERA. And it was only for the members. And we had to donate some money. And then I think that at the beginning, the rule was you couldn't use a camera that cost more than $20 or $25 or something like that. And we had to pay to participate, and we all took our photos and printed them out and framed them, and there was a show, the Crappy Camera Show, and that's how they helped raise money to pay the rent for that one particular event. What was incredible was the quality of the photographs was just unbelievable, because there were some really talented photographers. The Soho Photo Gallery was at the time, and I think still is, the only co-op gallery in New York City that is strictly photography. A lot of other galleries sell painting, photography, sculpture, but Soho was the only one that was strictly photography. We had some very talented people there as members, and the quality of the work with these $20 cameras just blew everybody away. And it's very funny that this is all coming up now, because just yesterday I got notice from Soho Photo that they're taking submissions for the latest Crappy Camera Show, which is like 30 years later. They're still doing it, and now it has become, believe it or not, an international competition. And the work is fabulous. It's really, again, has nothing to do with the camera and only to do with the person who's holding the camera and what's going on in their brain and in their eye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's such an excellent point. That's really what you bring to the camera. It's about your eye and your mind and your creativity. Yes. And then your example was great with the Crappy Camera Show. That really helped to illustrate your point as well. Let's talk about your eye, and let's talk about light for just a moment, Joel. And observing the light, seeing the light as a photographer, in your eye, what do you see? And kind of going back into tying in with your bio, what is a worthy image to record in your estimation?
Well, I always look for, we discussed this before. I was never going to make money and a living at drawing apples and bowls and wine glasses. So my art teacher said to me, go into advertising. So that's what I did. I spent over 50 years in the advertising business as an art director, a graphic designer, creative director at a small agency. And it was all about, for me, as a trained graphic designer, angles and shadows and shapes. So I'm not really good at taking pictures of people. I take them if I'm forced to, at somebody's birthday party, but otherwise I want nothing to do with it. I love looking at architecture, and I love looking at not only architecture of buildings, but the structure of objects. And at the early in the morning or late in the day, when long shadows are cast by the sun, and you get a combination of, really deep shadows and angles of buildings and structures, that's for me. That's what makes me happy.
Yeah. So now we're getting a good insight into your eye and angles and shadows and architecture. So that's a good segue into your pieces. You have two of them on exhibit
Yes.
currently at the gathering. Can you give us a little bit of a heads up about them, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at them.
Oh, sure. Well, the first one is a shot of Bethesda Church in Palm Beach on County Road, which is, I have a thing for churches. I love churches because I love the architecture. And there's so much going on in churches. I just love all the shapes. And that particular shot of Bethesda is standing right in front of the front doors. And I also teach a photography class. And I always tell people, once in a while, it wouldn't hurt if you took the camera and you did this to it, and you looked up, or you looked down, or you turned it this way, or you turned it that way. So that particular shot, I was standing in front of the door, and the doors are gorgeous and carved and great stonework. And I looked up and I saw the two palm trees up there against the building. And I said, there's a shot. And that was it. I shot it, and I think it turned out really well. I'm very, very happy with that particular piece. But that is all because you can't, one of the big problems with digital photography is I could stand there all day long pushing the button like this and come home with 500 photographs and then sit there and look at it in Photoshop and go, yeah, that one's good and that one's good, and the other 498 I'm going to throw away. To me, I know a lot of people are into that, but I'm not. When you have film and you have 36 frames on your camera, you have to be a little more careful. I can't just blow through 10 rolls of 36 frames each and spend, $200 processing them to throw out all but 4 pieces. It was a different economic situation. And now you can do that. And I think that, my own personal opinion, I hope nobody gets offended, I don't think that that's a creative process. That's a crapshoot. I'm going to shoot as many pictures as I can, and I know one of them is going to be good. Well, I have a better idea. Why don't you focus on one photograph and make it the best you can, and maybe do 1 or 2 variations on it instead of shooting 100 of them and praying that one of them turned out okay. So when in the film days, when I was teaching people photography, I would say to them, go out there with your camera, and I don't care what you shoot, whatever makes you happy, go shoot it. But I don't want you to put any film in the camera. Just look through the camera. Learn to look through that rectangle, because it's very different than just looking at the scene without a camera in your face. And study what's going on in there. Should this angle hit the corner, or should it be in the middle? I think that that's really important, that people need to slow down, because you can just shoot so many pictures in a minute these days. And I don't know how productive that is to get great images. I think you need to take your time, and think if you're going to be an quote unquote artist, you can't just barrel out there and shoot everything in sight. You need to be a little more discerning about what you're shooting and what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I also love the teaching approach, with your students, probably like early on, is just to get the camera and just start to look through it, get familiar with it, but don't shoot. And I love it. It seems like you really get excited about that one space, that one rectangle, and what can I do with it? And then
Yes,
exploring that to like the max in different ways.
because it's very limiting. It's a little rectangle,
Yeah.
and it's up to you to fill it. And you want to fill it with something maybe beautiful, or maybe at least interesting, or maybe shocking, or I don't know what, but it's your job to make that rectangle work. And I think that that's the creative process of photography, not just a motor drive at 35 frames a second, knocking off whatever happens and praying that something is good. I personally think it's more important to focus on the composition in the camera. And that, well, that's a whole other aspect. I mean, I got yelled at once by somebody. I did a talk down in Boynton Beach to a camera club, and I said during my talk that I'm not really a big fan of Photoshop because I don't like to manufacture my photographs. I use Photoshop the same way I used a paintbrush and spotting liquid to get little dots out of my images. I rarely crop anything. If I do, it's just minor because I couldn't maybe manipulate the camera in exactly the way I wanted to. So I might want to take an edge off one side. I use Photoshop as a tool to clean up the image that I've done, but not to remanufacture it or manufacture it altogether from nothing.
Right.
That's a whole other group of people who like to manufacture their photographs, and some of them are spectacular, just not my way. My way is to shoot what's naturally out there, maybe enhance it a little bit with a little contrast. That's about it. I really try to minimize using Photoshop for anything other than a little cleanup and a little contrast.
Joel, let's go ahead and take a look at these images and have you elaborate a little more. All
There
right.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that because I see, to me, when I looked at this, the arches of the front door and the arch of the two palm trees was just, music to me. It really, I really liked the way it looked. And once again, I'm back to all I had to do was look up. If I was just standing in front of the doors, they were beautiful doors, but there was nothing else going on there. But if you look up, that's what you see. And you can see it all the time. I mean, you see people out on the street shooting photographs, and they've got the camera up to their face, and they're clicking. You rarely see somebody getting down on the ground and shooting up, or standing on a chair and shooting down. To me, learning to see in photography, you really have to learn to see other perspectives on what's going on. And you have to explore it. For me, I don't, again, shoot 20 of these and pick the one that worked out best. I look in the camera to find the best angle and the best view of what interests me. Sometimes it works. Thankfully, most of the time it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But I'm still going to, for me, again, the creative process is to do that, is to explore what I'm looking at until I get to a point that I'm happy. And even the little point on the very bottom center of this frame, there's that little point sticking up. To me, that's an important part of the visual. If it wasn't there, it would be kind of a blank space to me. I put it there purposely. I angled it purposely to do that. So again, it's not for everybody. This is, again, my opinion. I'm not dumping on anybody who does it differently, but this is the way I shoot and what I record what interests me.
Yeah, I think this is such a beautiful shot, and I really am enjoying everything that you're sharing. And I think also, as you're saying, be exploratory, first of all, inside, the camera, but also to be exploratory in your visual field, looking up, looking down, move here, move there, the different angles. And also looking up towards the sky, I also feel is also, appropriate and symbolic, also for the subject matter. Well.
Yeah, and also in this particular picture, just to go back to Photoshop for a second, I will confess, I had this in Photoshop, and the only thing I did here on the very, very top of the picture, across the entire band, across the top, I added a little tone there because it was a little stark. So I just added a little gray in there. That was it. Otherwise, it is shot the way it was, which is what I prefer to do 90% of the time.
Yeah, keep the Photoshop to a minimal with you.
Yeah. I love Photoshop. It's an incredible tool, but I don't want to depend on it or use it to make my stuff better. I want to make me better. I don't need that tool to make it better for me.
A gorgeous shot.
Thank you.
All right, and here's a second piece from the gathering.
Yeah, this is the side door of a church in Charleston, and it's straight on. It's, you know, very symmetrical. I did once again add tone to the top just to help enclose the shapes at the top of the door, but the light that's there and the levels of light on each of the, I don't know what to call them, the things that are surrounding the door, that was all there. It was just because it was the right time of the day and the sun was in the right place. And I just loved the shapes. And then the shape of the door itself contrasting with the tiles on the floor, the marble, the black and white marble tiles, just did it for me. And just another thing to point out, because a lot of people would do this differently, but not me. On the very, very bottom, about a third of the way in on the left corner, you can see a little point coming up. It was part of a bush. And I like that pointing towards the doors. And also on the right side of the doors on the wall, there's sort of a lighter patch there that I kept in because the shot is so symmetrical, it can get visually boring. But if there's something that pulls your eye away, like that little patch on the right or the little leaf sticking up on the bottom, it kind of takes the edge off that really, you know, right down the middle look to it. But it was a great looking door. I couldn't resist.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering, Joel, did you plan out the time to be at this church to photograph? Because you're mentioning like the light was just like perfect, and you
No,
saw
it was an accident. It was an accident, a happy accident.
Right.
We
So
were-
it just happened.
Yep. We were walking down the street. I turned to the left, and there it was. You know, it was just beautiful.
Mhm. When you're walking around, do you normally have your camera with you, Joel? Just, you know, in case like, you know, you have these happy accidents, or when you, or do you go to places that you know you're going to photograph and have your camera, or is it just kind of an all around kind of thing? How does that play out for you?
It's a combination. I don't always carry around my big camera, but I usually carry around a small Sony that I have, which is incredible quality and does great. But I'll tell you a quick story if you have time. There's a very, very famous photographer who was a friend of ours. His name is Jay Mizell. And he once told a story of, he showed us a picture of a building in Manhattan in the evening. And most of the lights in an office building, most of the lights in the building were out, but there was one row of lights that were on. And in there, you could see a couple of the silhouettes of a couple of people talking. And he said, you know what? I've sold 1 million photographs in my career, and I never made more money than on any of them than I did on this, as far as stock photography goes. He sold it like thousands of times to stock photography. I said, well, how did you plan that out, Jay? He said, I didn't plan it out. He said, I was in a meeting with a bunch of boring account executives from the ad agency, and I was doing everything I could to stay awake. And I looked up and I looked out of the window and I saw that and I shot it and I put my camera down and I continued with the meeting. He processed the film, put the photo off to his stock photo house, and started selling like it was, you know, Christmas. So it's a happy accident, but he said, never, ever, 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 ever leave the house without a camera in your hand. He said, I don't care what kind it is, but never leave without a camera. If you're a photographer, never leave without a camera. And I try to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great story because you never know.
You never know.
All right, Joel, let's go ahead and let's look at a couple other of your beautiful images and have you share.
Yeah, this one. This is back to my people should look at other places theory. This is the cemetery at the Taos Pueblo in New Mexico, and we did a tour of the Pueblo, and I took a bunch of photographs. And on our way out to the parking lot was this structure that was the gates. The gate has a cross on it, and there's a cross obviously on top. And everybody that was there, there must have been 20 other people, and they were, if you go off to the right on this photograph, all the way around the corner, they were all taking the same picture. They're all standing there with their cameras going click, 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 click. And I said, there's nothing down there that interests me. This interests me. The juxtaposition of the two crosses, the one that was the structure of the fence and the one on top, was perfect. So myself, and there was a woman there also photographing it, but she was just taking it from a different angle. She saw the same thing I did. And we let the other 20 people do their thing. And we stood here and shot this. She didn't shoot what I did, but she recognized that this was interesting. And she photographed it in her own way, whatever that is. And that's why I love this one so much, because everybody else was shooting something else. And they were all taking the same photograph. So I just thought this was a great visual. And the little cloud up there didn't hurt, you know.
Yeah, the visual is so striking, and I love how you were sharing that, because that really adds to almost sort of not only the beauty of the image and the perspective, and the uniqueness that you saw, but it kind of adds a little bit to the air of mystery and that cloud up there. What a great touch! That perfect.
Well, it was fun. It's all part of my thing that in photography is to make successful images, look at things in a different way than everybody else. It's as simple as that. You know, you can look at, you can take a photograph of a basketball and make it interesting if you look at it in a different way than everybody else. So all those 20 people on the other end were looking at the same thing. And I came over here and found this. So I think that that's a big chunk of the philosophy of what I shoot and why I shoot it. I just try to look at things differently than the rest of the crowd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
59th Street Bridge in Manhattan. And it was just such a striking image for me. And, you know, I just loved it. I thought it was great. This was out of the window of an apartment on York Avenue, which was literally, you know, 100 yards away from the bridge. And again, I could have taken, you know, 100 shots of the bridge and the cars going by and the boats going by, but that didn't interest me. What interested me was the structure of the bridge and the steel and the different angles of everything. And in the upper left-hand corner, I wanted to tuck that right into the corner to draw the eye down to the rest of the photo. Not much more explanation than that. I just thought it was a beautiful image, and I love the crisscrossing steel, and the light was just perfect that day. And there it is.
The light is exquisite, Joel, and the composition.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, when you were looking out that window, Joel, did your eye immediately see this? You know, like you immediately eliminated all the other aspects that you were just mentioning, and did you just kind of go right to this and like, okay, that's it. That's what I'm going to photograph. Yeah,
pretty much. I have two. I think I shot 3 different images, but this was the one that I liked the most. It was just the way the angles of the steel appeared that appealed to me more than the other 2, and I just trashed the other 2. That's what I'm saying. I'll shoot 2 or 3 things, 2 or 3 angles, maybe, but I won't shoot 20 or 30. You know, 2 or 3 just because maybe I should have moved over a step this way or a step that way or up here. And that was it. This one just worked for me in all its aspects. The cloud in the background, the sky in the background, the angles of the steel, and the light was just perfect. It was just that time of day. It was late in the afternoon, and the sun was behind me and going right into the bridge. And it created beautiful shadows and shapes, and had to do it. Had no choice.
Yeah. And it has like a musical quality too, I feel.
It's got movement. It has movement.
Yeah.
Because they're different thicknesses of steel, and the beams are different sizes, and they all kind of work together. And yeah, you're right. It has almost a lyrical, you know, look to it. And I just think it's terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have one more. Now we're kind of moving into a little bit more nature territory.
Yeah. Well, this was very funny because we like to go to the Keys, and we go to the Keys every year, and just to do one thing, and that is nothing. We just go down there to do nothing and relax. And there's a spot there just south of Isla Morada called Ann's Beach, which is a very small beach, you know, a couple of picnic tables, and it's very, very, very nice. And you can walk out into the water for, you know, hundreds of yards before it even gets up to your waist. It's very shallow. And we were driving by one day, and I looked to my right and I saw this, and I slammed on the brakes, and I said to my wife, "I'll be right back." And I jumped out of the car and I ran out there and I shot this. And to me, this was just, you know, a happy accident. I did nothing to this. It's just that clump of leaves in the middle of the water against the trees in the background, I just thought was perfect. So I had to jump out of the car and shoot it. And it's just very serene and then very relaxing. And it's exactly how I feel about going to the Keys, serene and relaxing. And it's a beautiful tree. And that tree was probably 200 feet out into the water. And that which shows you how shallow it is. And it just worked out perfectly. And those leaves in the middle, in the front, I have no idea where they came from, but they were nice enough to be in exactly the right position for me when I wanted to shoot the picture.
Yeah, and I love these happy accidents, and those leaves in the front really help to kind of lead your eye up into, you know, the focal point of the images,
Yep.
which is similar to some of the other images we've been looking at as well. Something is kind of pointing in the direction of what you kind of want the eye to really kind of take in.
Yeah, and if you look at it, there's kind of between those leaves and the tree, there's kind of a triangle of shadow. It's a little darker in the water, and it creates that triangular shape that again, you're right, draws you right into the trees. And happy accidents are okay. You know, not everything has to be planned. You know, I'm not that vain that I have to say, well, I created this. No, I didn't create this. I found it. It was a happy accident, and I'm really glad I found it because it's one of my favorite photos. This and the double cross from the Taos thing are like two of my favorite photographs that I've taken in the last 20 years. I just love them both. I think that they really work for me and for where my creative aesthetic is. Those two really represent what I do and what I love to do the most.
And I think, speaking of your creative aesthetic, I'm so glad that you included this one for us to present, because we get a really strong feel for your love of architecture and line and shape, and kind of the you know, almost like a New York, you know, city influence as well, you know, kind of making its way in. But with this piece, you know, we get to see this, you know, kind of like other part of your aesthetic, Joel. You know, it has like a dreamy, surreal feel to it, and it has like a visceral quality, and kind of moving differently visually, you know, than some of your other ones. And it really takes us to see kind of like your broad range of your aesthetics.
Yeah, I don't want to put myself in a box and say, oh, I only do architectural detail. I mean, behind me, this mailbox, this magnificent Art Deco mailbox, is an architectural detail. But I don't want to put myself in a box and say, that's what I do. What I do is take photographs. And I don't care if it's a tree or a bridge or a mailbox, if it's the shapes are interesting to me and the shadows are interesting to me, and I can make a good composition out of it, I'm there. I'm ready to take the picture. And sometimes it's an accident. Most times I'm happy to say it's not. But I really try to plan what I'm shooting and look at it properly and make sure I'm doing the right thing. But it's just, it's again, I don't want to pigeonhole myself into architecture or trees, and try to broaden the scope a little bit. I'm just, I want people to see me as a photographer, not a bridge photographer or a tree photographer. Just a photographer who takes good images.
Mhm. You know, I'm wondering, Joel, how long did it take you to develop your photography voice? Did that come just through like shooting? Was it, you know, originally there and then it further developed? Can you talk about the evolution of finding your voice artistically through the camera?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess. You know, when Aunt Jean, by the way, Aunt Jean's 102 years old, and she's still around. She lives in Sunrise. When she gave me that camera, I didn't know what I was doing. I just shot pictures, you know. Over time, I guess what was going on in my brain was that architecturally shadow angle thing going on that eventually developed into where I got to. But I would say I had to be like 20 years before I got to a point where I said, I know what I'm doing now, and I know what I'm after, and I'm going to continue to pursue that. But I think it takes a long time. You can't just wake up one day and say, hey, I'm a great photographer. Go buy me a $5,000 camera and let me go out and take pictures and have a show. It doesn't work that way. You know, I think that's another issue. It's like everybody thinks they're a photographer now. And yes, there have always been a multitude of people out there who are very talented and good photographers who never had access to good quality cameras or cameras at all. So they never really developed their careers or whatever. Now, you know, I got a granddaughter with a Nikon. I mean, it's like, you know, the world has changed. Everybody's got a camera. And the problem with that is everybody thinks they're a photographer, and they're not. They just, you know, have a camera. Some of them can afford real good ones, some can't, but they all, everything they shoot, they think is the best thing that ever, you know, came out of a camera. And for the most part, it's not. I think that it's true in general in the art world, everywhere in the art world. I mean, you get people who are taking cans of paint, throwing them on canvases and calling it art. And for me personally, no, it's not. But, you know, if they know the right people and they get into a good gallery, they're artists. And I think it's the same thing with photography. And I think that if you look, when I do my little speech, when I do a presentation, I don't show any color photography at all. I show vintage photography by very famous people. And I try to explain to the audience what their thinking was behind the shot. So, you know, I have a Richard Avedon fashion shot that I use in the presentation, and it's a very famous photograph, which we're not looking at now, but it's a male and a female model, and I think they were in Paris, and she was wearing a coat that had a scarf that was sticking way up here and another part that was sticking way down there. And if you look at the photograph, you can see that all of the parts of this are bringing your eye into the coat, which is what they were selling. Is it a great piece of art? No, but it's a great example of how you can get people to look at what you want them to look at in a photograph. So those pieces of fabric that were flying around and aiming your eye into the coat were probably wired, you know, with tape behind them to do that, so that it would accomplish that goal. But there was conscious thought behind that to get somebody to direct their eye to a particular place for a particular purpose. And in this case, it was to buy, you know, $1,000 coat.
Mhm.
But that is kind of the essence of what I'm talking about is that my job is to get you to look at my photograph and get the same thing out of it that I got, or something real close to it. And you can say, you know, like you just said, the leaves in the water created that. I wanted you to say that. I wanted you to see that. And that's why I shot it in that way. And it's the same thing with the Richard Avedon photo. He did it purposely to get people to look at the coat. And there was tons of stuff around them. There were buildings in the background. There were other people walking around, but all you saw was the coat because he directed you to do that. Painters do that. You know, you get a painting, there's a focal point in the painting. assuming it's a recognizable painting, not just splashed paint. If there's a still life and somebody wants you to look at a particular thing, they're going to paint it so that your eye goes to that place.
Mhm.
And that's the purpose of doing this. Photography, painting, any of it, is to get people to look and see what you see or see what you want them to see.
Mhm.
To me, that's the creative process.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Mhm. I'm wondering, Joel, before we wrap things up, we still have a few more minutes. So we get a really good feel for where you're coming from with your photography, what you want us to see, what you want us to experience through the whole visual language of photography, and of course the lines, the shapes, the shadows, the light, and whatnot. So we, in addition to bringing ourselves to the camera, and you gave the example of kind of moving the eye around as an instructor, and perhaps anybody watching this who's a photographer, moving into photography, or perhaps even a seasoned photographer, could you just offer a little bit more tips on developing the eye?
Well, back to where I was before. That was the reason I had people look through a camera and not shoot anything, just to get used to seeing and visualizing what will happen in that 24 by 36 millimeter rectangle. I think that was the best training tool. Was, you can look at a building and go, wow, that's a beautiful building. But if you really zoom in on a little section of it, you'll find maybe some really, really interesting things going on that you don't see when you see the whole building. You may not see that little corner there that has, something going on that's really, really interesting, that if you zoom in on and take a picture of, people will go, wow, what is that?
Mhm.
And I think that's really the essence of it all. You can't just randomly pick up a camera and just shoot everything in sight and pray something looks good. You have to go after it with a vision and say, I love this building. Now let me look around and see what parts of it are more interesting than others, instead of just shooting the whole thing. Or back to where I was before, shooting the whole thing and then praying you can fix it in Photoshop. No, no, that doesn't work. That's not the creative, that's not, again, it's not my creative process, and maybe other people's.
Mhm.
I want to look, examine, and study whatever it is I want to shoot, whether it's an apple, a building, or a tree, and make sure that I am putting it in that frame in a way that will tell a story from my perspective, my viewpoint.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
think I
yeah.
think that's about as much as I could wring out of that one.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, it's really the art of seeing, and really,
Yes,
like, you love to dive in and really explore. It's like, okay, we have this building, we have this architecture. Okay, I like it, but wait a minute, I want to really get into it and look around
yes,
and kind of, it's almost like you want to bring the parts to the whole to the parts, zoom in and like, what can actually I can make aesthetically, tell a story,
yes.
let you see what I'm seeing through the camera,
That,
and then
yeah,
the final photo.
that to me, that's the creative process. It's not just shooting the building and hoping you can make something of it. It's shooting the building in a way that says something to you and hopefully to other people.
Mhm. And I think also, Joel, as you had said, also, it's also having that vision. Like, you have to have that vision and bring that to the camera
Mhm.
as well. That's like an important kind of like foundational element.
Mm. But I suggest to people, don't shoot pictures. Look through the rectangle and look at things in sections and parts, and upside down, and looking up and looking down. Just try that for an hour and see what you come up with. Then you can push the button.
Mhm. I love that strategy. What a great approach. Um, Joel, we do need to wrap the show up. We always have our guest provide the closing comments, or however you would like to close out the show. And if you could let us know how we can stay connected with you on social media.
Oh, sure, sure. My website is joelcohenimages.com. And I have a lot of stuff on there. Real quick, when we first moved to Florida 23 years ago, I said, oh my God, look at all this color. And I started shooting color. And then I ended up having a show at Paul Fisher Gallery a few years after that. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm done with color. I can't do it anymore. I went back to black and white. So the majority of my website is black and white images, but there's a lot of color images on there as well That's joelcohenimages.com. On Instagram, it's email Joel is my Instagram name. And Joel Cohen Images is also a page on Facebook. So please look at it. Look at it. I love comments, good, bad, or otherwise, because bad comments help too sometimes. You can't get insulted with a bad comment. You have to look at it and think about it and say, well, maybe they're right, or maybe they're not. But I like comments of all kinds. I want people to look at my work, and I want them to react to it. And I want to hear opinions. I've agreed with people who didn't like things I did. It's okay. I don't have that kind of ego, you know. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, I'd still like to know.
All right. Joel, thank you so much for being our guest today on Art and Talk and sharing your passion and your view and aesthetics and creativity, and also some, like technical ways to kind of focus in on photography. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching Art and Talk today. Just another quick little tie-in that the art and cultural exhibit is running through January 15th. So if you are in the Lake Worth Beach, South Florida area, you do want to stop by and check it out. Or if you're traveling through, you can also always check them out on their website, and you can find out a little bit more information about this exhibit and also about the artists that are contributing in the show. All right, so again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk soon on the next Art and Talk. Until then, be well and be blessed.